Hello, students. So, today we are continuing with the chapter Our Changing Earth. In our last class, we read about how the erosional and depositional work of river creates different kinds of landforms, right? Today we are going to read how works of sea currents or waves forms different kinds of landforms in the coastal areas. You know what are the coastal areas? The areas which are near to the sea or ocean are known as what? Coastal areas. Okay, so let's start to read. Sea or ocean waves and currents are the most powerful agents of coastal erosion. The erosional and depositional works of the sea waves give birth to a variety of coastal landscapes. So, sea or ocean waves, what are the main agents for erosional and depositional work of sea? The waves, the sea waves, and the sea currents are the main agents of erosional work of the coastal area, right? The erosional and depositional work of the sea creates a lots of coastal landform, or you can say coastal landscape. Okay, now first let us read about the erosional landforms. The landforms which are created because of the erosional work of the sea. Erosional means when the sea breaks the soil or breaks the area, that work is called as erosional activity. And depositional is when that when the sea carries those sediments and those sediment gets deposited in some other area and they create some another kinds of landforms. Those landforms are called as depositional landforms. Okay, so sea caves is, so you can see in the picture how sea caves are formed. These are the mountains and some brokage some brokage took place because of the erosional activity, and it creates these kinds of structure or landscapes which are known as sea caves. Okay, these are formed due to the gradual erosion of weak and strongly joint rocks by sea waves. So these are rocks which are which took these kinds of shapes because of the erosional work, because of the gradual erosion of weak and strongly joined rocks by sea waves. These joints are widened into large hollows that are called sea waves. So these joints are widened over the time into large hollows. They are called the sea waves. When sea waves continuously strike at the rocks and crack develop, and over time they become caves like structure that are called sea waves. So I hope you have understood how the sea waves means sea waves occurred, because the continuous strike of the waves at the rock, and because of those strike, crack develop, and over the time they became cave like structure. Okay, so this is sea caves are formed because of the erosional activity of sea. Okay, now sea arcs, you can see in the picture it's like a arc, so these are called sea arcs. When two caves approaches one another from either side of a headland and unite, an arc is formed in arc only roof of the cave remains. So when two caves come closer, both approaches and either side of the headland, and they get joined, unite, and arc is formed. The in arc is formed. In arc, only roof of the caves remains. Only roof of the caves remains. There is no other structure. Okay, and it looks like a arc, and that is why it's known as sea arcs. Okay. Now another kind of structure that you can see in the picture, these are known as stakes. Further erosion became the further erosion by the sea waves will finally lead to the collapse of the arc and breaking of roof. And finally, that roof also gets broken, and this kind of structure are found. Then seaward portion of the headland will remain as a pillar, which is widely known as deck. Now, sea cliff. The steep rocky coast rising vertically above sea water is known as sea cliff. So, these are also formed because of the erosional activity of the sea. Okay, these are known as sea cliff. It's a rocky coast. It's a coast who keeps on rising vertically above sea water, and these are known as sea cliffs. Okay. Now let us read about the whatever the landforms which have that we have read up until now. All those landforms were created because of the erosional activity, the breakage activity. Right now we are going to know about depositional activities. So beaches, how beaches are formed. So beaches are also landforms which are formed because of the erosional or depositional work of the sea. So beaches are formed because of the depositional activity of the sea. The sea waves deposit sediments along the shores that form beaches. So the sea carries sediments along with it and along it with its shores, and it get deposited near the sea, which are known as beaches. Okay. Marina Beach on Tamil Nadu coast is a famous beach of India. Now, bars and barriers. The embankment of sand formed by sedimentation through sea waves parallel to the coastline is known as bar, while the larger bar are termed as barriers. So, bars and barriers, these are the embankment of sands, which are also formed by the sediments through sea waves parallel to the coastline. Near the coastline, there are bars which are created because of this sediment. Those landform are known as bar, and larger bar are known as barriers. Okay. Now we have read about work of sea and the different landforms created by the work of sea. Now we are going to know about work of glaciers. Okay, you can see in the picture glaciers, right? Glaciers, water glaciers. Glaciers are river of ice. Okay, glaciers are the rivers of ice. The ice mass moving down a slope under the impact of gravity is called a glacier. So, it's a river which moves downward. These are moving down a slope, like a slope under the impact. Why they are moving like this? Because of the impact of gravity. So that is known as glaciers. The glaciers generally give birth to the erosional landform in the highlands and depositional landform in the lowland areas. A glacier erodes its valley by plucking stones and soil. So glacier carries with its soils and stones. Okay. Glaciers are melting, which is very much. Glaciers are constantly melting, but they used to melt very slowly. And another fact, glaciers are the only source of pure water that we drink. The water comes to river from the glaciers, and we drink those water. So glaciers are the only pure source of drinking water. Okay. And nowadays what happened, because of the global warming, glaciers are melting too fast. Okay, so the health of the earth is in danger. Recall having learned about the problem of global warming in chapter 1. So we read about global warming, right? So the environmental problem is affecting all of us in many ways. One of the most serious problem is melting of glaciers at mountain Kilimanjaro in Africa, glaciers have already begun to disappear. So it's a huge problem. So now let us read about first. Let us read about the erosional landform. So you can see erosion picture of an U-shaped valley. So glacier on their downward journey, when glaciers are coming downward, carve out deep, wide, steep, slided, and flat floored valley, which is known as the U shaped valley. Horn, creek, turn, tail, crack, etc. are the other erosional features of glaciers. So, when glaciers are coming downwards, they create these kinds of valley. They erodes the place and created these kinds of valley, which are known as U-shaped valley because it's look like U. Okay. Now let us read other names are also given: creek, turn, tail. All these are the landforms which are created because of the erosional work of the glacier. Okay. Now let us read about depositional landforms which are created by the glaciers. So glacier carries with it sediments, and sediments are full of sands and stones. Okay, so moraines, the material carried by the glaciers such as rock, big and small, sand and silt get deposited. These deposits form glacial moraines. There are ridge-like depositional features of glacial till. They can be dragged when the glacier melts. So you can see in the picture these are formed because of the depositional work, and they also can get they can be dragged. They can be carried away when glacier melts. Okay, so drumlines, esker, etc. are other important glacial landforms. So there are different kinds of depositional landform created by the glacier and erosional landforms created by the glacier. Now we will read about work of wind. So we know that wind is a very strong force of nature and it has so much power, right? So wind can make different kinds of landform, erosional as well as depositional, right? So, wind is an important geomorphic agent of erosion, but it is not effective as river and sea waves. Wind is comparatively a minor agent because of the low density of air as compared to the rocks and water. Wind work as an active erosional agent in the desert area. So, it erodes, but its power is not as wind is not as powerful as sea waves or rivers. Okay, but it also has the power to create different types of landforms because of the erosional activity. So let us first read about the erosional landform. So you can see in the picture the mushroom rocks. So it looks like a mushroom, right? The rocks having broad upper part and narrow base are called mushroom rocks. It resembles the shape of a mushroom. These are formed due to the excessive erosional work of wind in the lower section of the rock as compared to its upper part. So this structure, how this structure was created, because the wind erodes the excessively erodes the lower part of the rock. Okay, and that is why it become thinner and the upper parts become broader. So these kinds of structure are created. Earlier the actual shape of the rock was big, okay, but the wind eroded only the lower portion, and that is why this structure was created, which is known as mushroom rock. Okay, next let us read about depositional work of wind. sand dunes. So you can see in the picture, these are like mountains or hill of sands. Okay, so these are the hill of sands formed by the accumulation of sands and shaped by the movement of wind. So these kinds of hills of sands are created because of the depositional work of the wind. So winds carries these sands in the desert area and it gets deposited in some other area, and it's created these hills of sands. Okay, and these are known as sand dunes. Dunes are formed when wind deposits sands in the form of low hill and are generally formed in groups. And these are known as sand dunes. Okay. Now let us read about loess. So you can see in picture in your book the picture of loess. The fine dust blown beyond the desert's limit. The fine dust blown beyond the desert limits is deposited on the neighboring land in a large areas called loess. Loess deposits generally occur at very distant places from the source area of their sediment supply. So loess, you can see in the picture, these are also formed by the sands. So when the sediments are carried away from the desert area to the neighboring area, the source area is very much far away from the deposited area. Okay, so the wind carries this sand to a far area from it is outside the desert area, and these kinds of structure are created which are known as loess. Okay, loess deposit generally occur at very distant place from the source area of their sediment supply. Okay, so here we are ending the chapter. So let us have a revision what we have read in this chapter. So in this chapter we read that different kinds of landforms in the lithospheric plates keeps on moving, right? And different kinds of landforms are formed because of this movement, and two forces are responsible because of the movement of the lithosphere. What are the forces? Exogenic and endogenic forces, and these forces created different kinds of landforms. So one of the powerful endogenic force was earthquake, volcanoes, those things, and exogenic forces are the forces which works from outside of the earth. So these forces like river, water, all this has the power to create different kinds of landform through their erosional and depositional activity, right? We read that river creates different kinds of landforms like river valley, waterfall, then oaks, bowline, flood plains, etc. Then sea creates sea capes, sea arcs, beaches, etc. And glaciers create U-shaped valley moraines, and also winds creates mushrooms, sand dunes, mushroom rocks, sand dunes, loess, etc. So these are how the art. These are how the artist keeps on changing because of the different forces. And river, wind, all these are what? All these are exogenic forces, and endogenic forces like earthquake and volcanic eruption also change the landform of the earth. Okay, so these some of we got to know about some of the forces or natural phenomena which creates different kinds of landform in the world. Okay, so this much for this chapter. If you have any confusion, any question, please ask. So we are ending the class here. Thank you, students.